In the harsh lands of 1870s
White man,
America,
don't
a lonely
forgive.
rancher makes a shocking discovery that threatens to ignite a brutal war. An Apache girl hangs from a tree with a message carved in hatred, but one man's choice to show humanity may change fate forever. This is a story of guilt, courage, and a fragile path toward forgiveness. Like, share and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from now. Let's get started. Jacob Miller had lived alone on the edge of the Arizona territory for nearly 7 years. Far from towns and farther from people. His ranch sat where dry plains met scattered cottonwood trees, a place most men avoided because it bordered Apache land. Jacob liked the silence. Silence didn't ask questions about the past. Each morning, he rose before the sun, fed his horse, checked his cattle, and told himself that solitude was a kind of peace. Yet, even in quiet moments, memories of gunfire, screams, and burning homes followed him like shadows he could never outright. On one pale morning in early spring of the 1870s, Jacob rode toward the river bend to inspect a broken fence. The air was cold, and the sky carried the dull gray of coming rain. As his horse slowed near a cluster of cottonwood trees, Jacob noticed something unnatural, a dark shape hanging where branches should have been bare. At first, he thought it was a dead animal caught by a rope. Then the shape moved slightly with the wind, and his stomach tightened. He urged his horse forward, dread filling every breath. As he drew closer, the truth revealed itself in cruel detail. A young Apache woman hung from a thick branch, her feet barely brushing the ground. Her long black hair covered part of her face, and her clothes were torn and stained with dirt and dried blood. Around her neck hung a rough wooden sign, tied with rawhide. The letters were carved deeply, uneven, but clear enough to read, "White man don't forgive." Jacob felt his hands tremble as he read the words. Knowing they were meant to be seen, for a long moment, Jacob sat frozen in his saddle. He knew the dangers of touching her. Apaches might believe he had done this. White men might accuse him of sympathy. Either way, death was never far. Still, something heavier than fear pressed on his chest. He dismounted slowly, every step feeling like a confession. The woman's face was too young for such cruelty. Her wrists were bruised, and her neck showed signs of more than just the rope. This was no tribal punishment. This was murder, dressed as a warning. Jacob pulled out his knife and cut the rope, catching her body before it hit the ground. She was lighter than he expected. He laid her gently on the earth, removing the sign and setting it aside as if it were poison. The wind whispered through the trees, and Jacob felt watched, though no one was there. He took off his coat and covered her broken body, murmuring words he hadn't spoken since the war, an awkward prayer, asking forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved. As he worked. Memories flooded back. He remembered villages burned by soldiers wearing the same uniform he once wore. He remembered being told all Apaches were enemies, less than human. He remembered turning away once when he shouldn't have. The sign around the girl's neck felt like it had been carved for him personally, accusing and condemning, "White man don't forgive." Jacob wondered if it was true, or if forgiveness was simply something no one had taught them how to give. He lifted her into his arms and carried her to his horse, laying her carefully across the saddle. Each step back to the ranch felt heavier than the last. He imagined riders appearing on the ridge, rifles raised. He imagined the sheriff accusing him without listening. Still, he kept going. The lonely rancher had spent years running from responsibility. For once, he would not leave a body behind and pretend it wasn't his concern. Back at the ranch, Jacob dug a grave near the riverbank where wildflowers sometimes bloomed after rain. His hands blistered as he worked, but he welcomed the pain. It reminded him he was still alive, still capable of doing something right. He placed her in the ground with care, arranging stones to protect the grave from animals. He said her burial deserved dignity, even if the world had denied it to her in death. As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the land, Jacob stood silently by the grave. He knew this was not the end, it was the beginning of trouble. Someone had killed the girl to ignite hatred, and the message carved into that sign was meant to divide blood from blood. Jacob felt the old fear return, but alongside it was something unfamiliar: resolve. The past had finally caught up to him, hanging from a tree in plain sight, and this time, he would not look away. Night fell heavy over Jacob Miller's ranch, the kind of darkness that pressed against the walls and crept into the mind. The fire inside his cabin burned low, but sleep would not come. Every sound, the wind, the creak of wood, the distant cry of an owl, felt like a warning. Jacob sat with his rifle across his knees, staring at the door. He knew the Apache would come. They always learned the truth of things faster than settlers believed, and when they came, he would have only his honesty to defend him. Near midnight, the horses outside grew restless. Jacob stepped onto the porch and saw shadows moving at the edge of the firelight. Riders emerged from the darkness, their faces painted, their posture calm but ready. There were many of them. At their front rode an older warrior with silver threaded through his black hair. He raised one hand, and the other stopped. No arrows were drawn, no guns were lifted. Silence spoke louder than threats. The leader dismounted and approached slowly. His eyes were sharp, measuring Jacob's every breath. In a steady voice, he asked why a white man had buried an Apache woman with respect instead of leaving her hanging as a message. Jacob swallowed his fear and answered truthfully. He said he found her by the river, already dead, already wronged. He said the sign was not Apache work, and he said he could not leave her there like an animal. His voice shook, but he did not look away. The warrior listened without interruption. When Jacob finished, the man introduced himself as Ch. He explained the girl was his niece, taken days earlier by outlaws who hated both Apaches and lawmen. They wanted war, not justice. The sign was their lie, carved to turn tribes and settlers against each other. Chaska's eyes darkened as he spoke, grief hidden behind discipline. Jacob felt the weight of that grief settled between them like a shared burden. Chaska asked Jacob about his past, and Jacob did not hide it. He spoke of being a former cavalryman, of orders given and orders followed, and of the shame that lingered long after the uniform was gone. He admitted he had once believed lies because they were easier than truth. Chaska nodded, saying pain taught men slowly, but it taught them well. The air between them shifted, not to friendship, but to understanding. By dawn, an uneasy agreement formed. Jacob would help uncover the truth, and the Apache would hold back their anger unless betrayal followed. Chaska warned him that lies spread faster than bullets, and many white men would not want peace. Jacob understood. He had lived among them. Still, he agreed to ride into town and speak to the sheriff, knowing his words might make him enemies on both sides. Courage, he realized, was often mistaken for foolishness. The town of Red Hollow woke slowly as Jacob arrived. Apache riders visible on the distant ridge. Murmurs followed him as he dismounted. Inside the sheriff's office, Jacob told everything: the body, the sign, the outlaws, and the danger of war. The sheriff was skeptical at first, but evidence mattered. Other settlers had lost family to the same outlaw gang. Pieces began to fit together, forming a truth no one wanted but everyone needed. Days later, the outlaws were tracked and captured after a brief, violent clash. One confessed under pressure, admitting the girl's death was meant to spark bloodshed. When the truth spread, fear turned into shame. The sign that once threatened forgiveness became proof of manipulation. Jacob watched as Apaches and townsfolk stood apart, but no longer reached for weapons. It was not peace, but it was a beginning. On a quiet morning, Chaska returned alone to the riverbank. He stood beside Jacob at the grave, placing a small carved token among the stones. He said his niece's spirit would remember the white man who chose dignity over fear. Jacob said nothing, because words felt small. As Chaska rode away, Jacob remained, feeling less alone than he had in years. The land was still harsh, the past still heavy, but for the first time, forgiveness felt possible not as a promise, but as a choice.